The jungle did not whisper, it screamed. A thunderous crack split the dawn as branches snapped under the force of Marcus the jaguar's lunge. Alara the deer stumbled, breath ragged, her eyes wide with panic. The narrator said, "In this place, life hangs by a single heartbeat." Shadows shifted as Marcus's claws tore through silence. Hunger etched in every strike. Blood misted the air, staining golden light with crimson truth. Alara froze, trembling, knowing one wrong step would end her fragile existence. The narrator said, "Here, survival is not promised, it is stolen." The wind carried cries that twisted into echoes of fear. Every rustle was betrayal. Every silence, a threat. The jungle opened its teeth, swallowing innocence. In this raw chaos, life clawed for seconds, but death always hunted closer. The forest exhaled silence after violence, yet silence carved itself in dread. The narrator said, "Where one breath ends, another begins." Marcus vanished into shadow, leaving only broken twigs and metallic scent of blood. Insects swarmed quickly, buzzing like vultures in miniature. Kira clung to his mother Sarah, his tiny hands gripping her fur tightly as if the hunt's echo reached his heart. Fear spread like vines through every creature. The narrator said, "The jungle remembers every scream." Overhead vultures wheeled, their black wings slicing morning air, waiting for flesh. The forest did not mourn, it adapted. Yet in the canopy, even survival whispered its price. Marcus's hunger was not cruelty, it was survival carved into flesh. The narrator said, "Predators are not villains, they are necessity." On the riverbank, water shimmered like shattered glass, reflecting chaos. Doran the crocodile floated, one amber eye breaking surface as patience glimmered. Crimson stains swirled downstream from Alara's wounds. A heron rose in panic, wings scattering droplets like sparks of silver. The narrator said, "Even silence here tastes of violence." The jungle stood indifferent, yet alive with eyes. Survival was not moment but chain, stretching back to beginnings older than memory. In the treetops life clung where it could. The narrator said, "Every leaf holds a witness, every shadow a secret." Macaws burst skyward wings, blazing red, blue, and gold. Below vines quivered as small creatures fled unseen. Nilo the sloth hung frozen from his branch, eyes wide, though body motionless. His stillness mimicked safety, though fear betrayed him. The narrator said, "Stillness is disguise, not shield." Even innocence learned to play dead when the world demanded endurance. The forest offered camouflage, never sanctuary. The first act of survival ended, but scars remained. The narrator said, "What is taken feeds what remains." Insects crawled fast, stripping flesh from broken bones, leaving them pale beneath ferns. The sun climbed higher, burning away morning mist and exposing the hunt's aftermath. Kale the vulture swooped, his black wings cutting the sky, talons curling in descent. Sarah clutched Kira tighter, her eyes darting at every movement. The narrator said, "Fear is carried like breath." Yet fear was not weakness, it was warning, a guide through the dark. Hunger still pressed on, and already survival shifted its gaze to new prey. The forest exhaled slowly as dawn returned, and Sarah the monkey clutched Kira tightly against her chest. The narrator said, "Not every battle is fought with claws, some are fought with the will to protect." She pressed her cheek to his small head, feeling his heartbeat race beneath fragile ribs. Her eyes scanned the canopy, alert for every sound that could become danger. Kira whimpered softly, his tiny fingers curling into her fur as if afraid to let go. Sarah whispered a broken hum, not words but a rhythm, trying to calm his fear. The narrator said, "It is not strength that binds life. It is tenderness that refuses to surrender." Around them, branches creaked, the forest alive with unseen eyes, yet in her arms lay the reason she refused to fall. Sarah moved carefully along the branches, each step a question of survival. The narrator said, The forest is no sanctuary. It is a maze where every shadow hides a test. Leaves shivered under her cautious weight as she searched for safe passage. Kira pressed tighter against her, whining softly in hunger. She reached for figs that hung above her, but the branch groaned, forcing her to retreat. Hunger gnawed inside her, yet fear sharpened her caution. The narrator said to choose food is to risk death. To choose safety is to invite starvation. Her gaze swept below where Marcus the jaguar prowled unseen, his patience as steady as her fear. Still she climbed, for choice was no longer hers, it belonged to the jungle. At the river's edge Sarah crouched, her eyes locked on the shifting surface. The narrator said, "Water is life, but life here is also death waiting to strike." Doran the crocodile drifted beneath, his amber eye fixed unblinking on the shore. Sarah gripped the bark, her breath uneven, torn between thirst and terror. Kira reached toward the glittering water, his tiny hand stretching dangerously close to its pull. She pulled him back quickly, heart thundering as if it might give her away. The narrator said, "Every choice carves destiny. A sip could mean survival or the last taste of existence." The water shimmered under the sun, reflecting blood from the day before, a reminder of what patience beneath the surface always demanded. Above the canopy Kale the vulture circled, his wings carving silence into the sky. The narrator said, "Some predators wait not for the living but for the fall." Sarah looked upward, her grip on Kira tightening as shadows passed over them. She knew Kale's patience was not hunger alone, it was prophecy. She climbed higher into the fig tree, her arms trembling from exhaustion, yet she dared not pause. Kira whimpered, unaware of the dark omen watching from the sky. The narrator said, "Love cannot fight the storm, but it can endure within it." Sarah pressed her son closer, her breath ragged but unbroken. For every heartbeat she protected was another defiance against the waiting silence. The day dimmed into dusk, the forest burning orange as shadows stretched long. Sarah settled into the fork of a towering fig tree, curling around Kira as he drifted into uneasy sleep. The narrator said, "Night brings no mercy, only silence heavy with waiting teeth." She listened to each crack of wood, every rustle that could betray danger. Below, Marcus moved unseen, his eyes glowing faint beneath the last flicker of sun. Sarah held her child tighter, her body trembling with exhaustion. The narrator said, "Fragile bonds defy extinction. They are threads strong enough to fight the dark." The forest closed in with whispers, yet in the quiet rhythm of Kira's breath, Sarah found the will to survive another night. The jungle shifted from watchful silence to restless hunger. The narrator said, "Peace, here is a lie. It is only the pause before the storm." Sarah clutched Kira tightly, her belly aching from hunger she dared not answer. The leaves quivered under her weight as she searched for figs, but each fruit hung out of reach. Below, Marcus prowled through ferns, his muscles rippling as shadows swallowed him whole. His golden eyes glimmered, following every move above. Sarah trembled, torn between feeding her son and protecting him from certain death. The narrator said, "Survival is not a choice. It is a torment carved into every breath." Hunger pressed against love, and both felt like knives. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a storm gathering its fury. The narrator said, "When hunger does not break you, the sky will try." Sarah moved higher into the branches, Kira pressed tight against her chest. Wind lashed through the canopy, tearing leaves from their stems. She held firm, her arms aching from the effort, but Marcus advanced with silent steps below. Raindrops fell sharp against her fur, and Kira whimpered, frightened by the thunder. The narrator said, "Every element conspires to test the fragile." The storm split the sky with jagged light, revealing predator and prey bound together by survival's cruel hand. The storm unleashed its weight, sheets of rain crashing through the canopy. The narrator said, "Water does not choose sides. It drowns the weak and the strong alike." Sarah clung to a branch slick with water, her fur drenched, her body trembling. Kira whimpered, his cries drowned by thunder. Marcus crouched in the mud below, his eyes locked upward, waiting for her mistake. Lightning split the sky, exposing his teeth in a flash of white. Sarah's grip slipped, her claws scraping bark, but she tightened with a desperate cry. The narrator said, "When the world itself hunts you, only will remains." Every breath was a struggle against the storm's endless weight. The storm began to fade, but danger only sharpened. The narrator said, "When one trial ends, another waits." Sarah scanned the forest below, her heart racing as she spotted another shadow. It was Rowan, the rival monkey, his eyes gleaming with hunger. He crept along the branches, his frame wiry, his gaze fixed on the figs above her. Sarah hissed, clutching Kira close, refusing to yield. Rowan bared his teeth, a silent challenge in the fading rain. The narrator said, "In the jungle, rivals do not wait. They seize." The fragile family was not only hunted from below, but threatened from above. The circle of survival grew smaller, and Sarah's strength thinned. The forest roared with tension, predators and rivals closing in from all sides. The narrator said, "Conflict does not come alone. It multiplies until escape is gone." Sarah crouched low, shielding Kira as Marcus prowled below and Rowan pressed closer above. Her body trembled from exhaustion, fur dripping with rain. Kira whimpered, his cries too loud for silence. Marcus lifted his head, ears twitching, his eyes sharp with recognition of weakness. Rowan bared his teeth, his body tense, ready to lunge for what she protected. The narrator said, "Every heartbeat becomes a battle drum when the end draws near." The canopy felt like a cage, and every path forward closed into teeth. The forest shifted as if secrets stirred in its breath. The narrator said, "What is feared may yet be misunderstood." Marcus the jaguar paused beneath the dripping canopy, his muscles tense but his eyes softened by another sound. From the shadows a faint mewl echoed, small and broken. Marcus turned, his head lowering, revealing a cub hidden in the roots. Its spotted fur clung to damp soil, body trembling with weakness. The predator that stalked Sarah was also a protector bound by hunger and duty. The narrator said, "The hunter is not only destruction, he too fights to preserve his blood." The truth clawed deeper than fear. Predator and prey were bound not by cruelty but by shared desperation. Sarah froze above, her eyes fixed on Marcus as he nudged the cub with his nose. The narrator said, "What she feared as merciless now revealed fragility." Marcus licked the cub's fur, his growl softened to a rumble of reassurance. Sarah's grip on Kira tightened as realization pierced her chest. She was not the only mother defending her child. Kira stirred, his whimper echoing the cub's faint cry below. The canopy trembled with two stories bound by the same thread. The narrator said, "Survival is not villainy, it is inheritance." In that moment, the predator's shadow shifted into something more complicated, a reflection of her own desperate fight. Rowan the rival crept closer along the branches, his eyes gleaming with hunger for what Sarah clung to. The narrator said, "Not all threats wear claws of predators. Some share your own bloodline." He snarled low, his wiry body taut as he reached toward the figs above. Sarah bared her teeth, shielding Kira, her body trembling yet defiant. Below, Marcus curled his body around the cub, his hunt abandoned for duty. The jungle rewrote its truth before her eyes, prey turned protector, rival turned predator. The narrator said, "The betrayal of kin cuts deeper than the strike of beasts." What she feared in Marcus was mirrored now in Rowan's grasp. The storm's silence broke with Rowan's lunge. He stretched forward, his fingers clawing for fruit above Sarah's head. The narrator said, "Hunger blinds loyalty and consumes bonds." Sarah dodged, clutching Kira tighter as Rowan hissed in frustration. Below, Marcus's cub mewled again, and Marcus's head lifted sharply, his growl vibrating through the earth. For a moment, predator and prey locked eyes across the divide. In Sarah's gaze was fear and resolve. In Marcus was warning and recognition. The narrator said, "Enemies in flesh, yet mirrors in truth." The air thickened as though the forest itself held its breath, waiting for blood to decide. The jungle revealed itself not as enemy or ally, but as a stage of contradictions. The narrator said, "Truth is not simple. Survival writes its law in paradox." Sarah crouched, trembling yet unbroken, shielding Kira from Rowan's rage. Marcus guarded his cub, hunger momentarily silenced by duty. Two mothers, two children, bound by a world that punished mercy but demanded it too. Rowan snarled again, his ambition unshaken. The forest rang with tension, every heartbeat an unanswered question. The narrator said, "The twist of truth is this: there are no villains here, only lives colliding under the weight of survival." The canopy erupted with motion, fear exploding into violence. The narrator said, "Climax is not choice. It is collision." Rowan lunged at Sarah, claws outstretched, snarling with hunger and fury. Sarah screamed, clutching Kira tighter, her body arching away as bark splintered beneath her. Below, Marcus growled, his cub pressed beneath his body as protection. Lightning cracked in the distance, thunder rolling like drums of war. The air stank of fear, sweat, and blood yet to spill. The narrator said, "This is survival's peak, breathless, brutal, without mercy." The branches shook under their weight, one slip threatening to end more than one life. Rowan struck again, his teeth snapping inches from Sarah's face. She twisted, her body slamming into the branch as Kira wailed in terror. The narrator said, "Every scream becomes thunder in the battle for survival." Sarah's claws raked Rowan's shoulder, blood spraying across slick leaves. He roared, his grip slipping but not surrendering. Below, Marcus's growl deepened, vibrating through soil and bone, his golden eyes locked on the canopy. The cub whimpered beneath him, tiny body trembling. The narrator said, "Above and below, the jungle echoes with cries. One family against another, one bond against hunger." The tree itself groaned under the weight of wall. The branch snapped, sending shards of bark raining into the air. Sarah clung to Kira with desperate strength as she swung to another limb, her arms screaming in pain. Rowan scrambled, his eyes wild with rage, leaping after her. The narrator said, "The climax of survival is measured in seconds, each one heavier than life itself." Sarah hissed, her teeth bared, as Rowan's claws grazed Kira's fur. Below, Marcus leapt forward, his roar shaking the canopy, his cub crying out in fear. Predator, prey, and rival collided in chaos, each driven by need. The narrator said, "Mercy does not live here, only will and desperation." Sarah landed hard on a thick branch, her body shaking as she shielded Kira. Rowan slammed into her, the two locked in a desperate clash of teeth and claws. The narrator said, "Survival demands sacrifice, it always takes its price." Blood smeared across fur, cries blending with the roar of the storm. Kira shrieked, his cry piercing like lightning itself. Below, Marcus roared louder, his body trembling with fury, torn between hunger and protection. The cub beneath him pressed close, eyes wide with terror. The narrator said, "The climax is not the end of one life, but the breaking of many." The jungle itself quaked, every creature holding its breath for the outcome. The final clash tore the silence apart. Sarah lunged with a scream, her claws ripping across Rowan's chest. He staggered, blood spraying into the rain, his body collapsing onto the branch. The narrator said, "The climax does not wait, it consumes." Rowan gasped, eyes wide with fading fire, then slipped into the shadows below. Sarah clutched Kira, trembling, her body streaked with blood and rain. Marcus roared again, pressing his cub closer, his hunger buried beneath duty. The narrator said, "In the storm of survival, no one wins, only some endure long enough to see another dawn." The canopy stilled, broken only by breath and the memory of violence. The canopy sagged beneath silence, broken only by the hiss of fading rain. The narrator said, "After the storm, the jungle does not mourn, it simply begins again." Sarah crouched, trembling, her fur slick with blood and water, clutching Kira close against her chest. Rowan's body lay crumpled below, his eyes wide but empty, his ambitions silenced forever. Marcus curled protectively around his cub, his roar now a low hum of reassurance. Above them, vultures circled, their wings casting long shadows across the scarred branches. The narrator said, "Resolution is not triumph, it is inevitability." Life had survived, but the cost stained every breath with memory. Sarah pressed her face against Kira's fur, inhaling the fragile rhythm of his breath. The narrator said, "Survival feels like victory until you taste its emptiness." Her arms trembled, but she did not let go, not even to rest. Kira stirred, his whimper small yet alive, echoing like a fragile drum of defiance. Below, Marcus licked his cub's damp fur, each gesture heavy with duty. Two mothers bound by the same truth, neither enemy nor ally, but mirrors of need. The narrator said, "The jungle spares nothing, yet it gives reason through those who remain." In the silence that followed, every breath carried the weight of what had been lost. The forest glowed with fading orange as the storm drifted into silence. The narrator said, "Nature is not cruel, it is absolute." Broken branches hung above like scars carved into the canopy. Sarah shifted higher into the fig tree, searching for shelter, her body aching with every movement. Kira's tiny hand gripped her fur, his eyes fluttering with exhaustion. Marcus carried his cub into the shadows, leaving behind the carcass of Rowan as tribute to inevitability. The narrator said, "Resolution ties itself to the beginning. What began with a hunt ends with survival, yet the ground remains soaked with the same blood." The jungle exhaled as night drew its veil. The narrator said, "Resolution is not peace, it is silence born of exhaustion." Sarah nestled into the fork of the tree, wrapping Kira with her arms, her eyes half closed but alert. His chest rose and fell, fragile and stubborn. Below, Marcus rested, his cub tucked beneath his chest, his golden eyes still watching the dark. The vultures landed near Rowan's body, their wings rustling with the sound of inevitability. The narrator said, "In the end, survival is never clean. It feeds on what is taken." Shadows thickened, yet within them, two fragile bonds endured against the weight of fate. Darkness claimed the forest, the last light swallowed by shadows. The narrator said, "Resolution completes the circle, binding the living to the fallen." Sarah whispered softly, rocking Kira as sleep finally claimed him. Her body shook, but her grip never loosened. Marcus's eyes glowed from the underbrush, his cub pressed close, their figures fading into the night. Rowan's body lay still, already claimed by wings and beaks. The narrator said, "Nature is not kind, nor cruel, it is final." The jungle hushed into eternal rhythm, every creature reminded of the law carved into its soil. To survive was not to win, only to endure until the next dawn. The jungle inhaled the night, each sound sharper in the silence. The narrator said, "The echo of survival is not in the living, but in what lingers." Sarah pressed Kira close, his small breath steady against her chest. Her eyes scanned the darkness, seeing shadows even where none moved. Marcus lay hidden below, his cub nestled close, his eyes glowing faint beneath moonlight. Above them, the vultures rustled, wings spreading in anticipation of another dawn. The narrator said, "What remains is fragile, but it endures." The forest did not care who was gone and who remained, yet in its endless rhythm, survival whispered into eternity. The forest stirred with distant cries, unseen creatures answering the silence. The narrator said, "Every life lost becomes a story remembered only in echoes." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, exhaustion flooding her body, yet she did not release Kira. His chest rose and fell in fragile defiance against the law of the wild. Marcus licked his cub's fur slowly, a rhythm of endurance that mirrored Sarah's heartbeat above. The jungle hummed, insects and owls stitching sound into the dark. The narrator said, "Here, survival is both wound and promise." The canopy shivered with wind, carrying the memory of those who would never rise again. Kira stirred, his small hand curling into Sarah's fur as he whimpered in uneasy sleep. The narrator said, "The echo of survival is not triumph, It is fragile continuation. Sarah rocked him gently, her arms aching but unbroken. Below, Marcus's cub whimpered too, their cries threading together like a shared chorus. The forest listened without judgment, the wind carrying their voices across endless trees. The narrator said, "What endures is not the strongest claw but the will to hold what matters." The night grew heavier, pressing down like memory, but the fragile bonds refused to yield to silence. The jungle floor was already reclaiming Rowan, his body consumed by wings and beaks. The narrator said, "Even death feeds the cycle. Nothing is wasted, not even ambition." Sarah turned her gaze away, shielding Kira from the sight, though his eyes remained shut in sleep. Marcus did not look either, his ears twitching to the sounds of tearing flesh. The vultures feasted with no shame, their cries piercing the night like broken laughter. The narrator said, "The echo of survival is not mercy. It is continuation through loss." Every fallen body became tomorrow's soil, every breath a borrowed gift from the dead. The night sealed itself in silence, a stillness that felt eternal. The narrator said, "The echo of the jungle is not its voice, but its absence." Sarah pressed her face into Kira's fur, listening to his fragile heartbeat, a rhythm louder than the forest itself. Marcus shifted, his cub nestled closer, their golden eyes fading into shadows. The vultures fell silent, wings folded, as the moon carved silver across broken branches. The narrator said, "The jungle hides ancient secrets, but humanity cuts deeper every year." The last line fell sharp into the silence. Survival is never victory, it is only the echo that remains.